Creatives, community, kind folks out there, hello. Today is Future Friday. I am your host, DBJ, and we will somewhat finish our discussion of aberrants. Here on Future Friday, we will be talking primarily about from the modern day on into the far future, and of course, making a big giant circle all the way back into the beginning of our conversation about aberrants, Cthulhu, Lovecraftian horror, and such, and how we can use it in our tabletop RPG games. If you wish to participate, of course, you can catch the show live at all times. And if you just wish to listen in and or participate through Discord, you may do so as well. We simulcast, I love that word, simulcast this show over at Fantasy Grounds College. And if you join their Discord, go over to the left, slide down to the boiler room, and you will see all of us hanging out down there. Now, modern day horror, we've got a lot of examples of this, and I also have the Lovecraftian horror Wikipedia, which I'm quite surprised Dead Man did not post into the into the Discord, but okay, that's fine. But much of what is incorporated into Lovecraftian horror during, I suppose some would say, maybe New England turn of the century style of writing, has a lot to do with our modern day, all the way into, I would include it in our modern day, all the way into our far future horror descriptors of using aberrants. Now, one of the hallmarks of horror in general, let alone science fiction horror, is isolation. Plenty of things we can borrow from science fiction, and of course modern day, is the idea of isolation and using those horror tropes. For example, there's always a starship filled with a limited number of crew, and stumble upon some mysterious and fill in the MacGuffin, whether it's a mysterious artifact or life form or receiving a message or hovering on the event horizon of a black hole, so on and so forth. Maybe the starship has been lost in space, or they were testing or used some sort of hyperdrive and are deposited in a location that is unknown to them in their star charts. Maybe they have arrived in a portion of the galaxy or even another galaxy different from theirs, where some of the rules of reality have shifted around. And part of aberrants, along with, because we talked about this on Monster Monday and throughout the week, that their anatomy, there's a lot of body horror in the sense of giving you clues that something isn't right. There's, eyes and mouths and noses are not in the correct places. And that gives us a clue that the world itself might not operate in the way we wish it to be. And there's always been this theme of there's something man was not meant to know. This is often reflected in starship travel stories, where a starship can go into hyperspace, but everyone warns you not to look outside, or the passengers and the crew must be in a stasis or deep sleep when they travel through the wormhole, or insanity is imminent if you take a look into like fourth and fifth and sixth dimensional spaces. And so there's almost this idea that science has reached the point at which it's unable to explain the unknown, and that unknown can only be comprehended through the minds of those who have those of the insane, those who have are no longer tied to our three-dimensional space and our normal society. And of course, something tends to follow you from that. Now, mind you, yeah, the 40K the warp. Yep, absolutely. And what a great way to, even if you're not a science fiction fan, you can always use those elements. For example, the Bermuda Triangle is a good example of using something like sailing ship version of sailing into a place, into the unknown, and being surrounded by something that could drive you insane. That's also, I believe, a part of the mythology of the age of piracy, where you take a sailing ship and you might go through a storm or something of that nature. Maybe the stars seem to shift in the night sky. You don't know where you are, and something out there is hypnotizing you or calling you or driving you insane or calling forth the darker portions of your mind. Yeah, Dead Man the Storyteller says 40K took the warp from Dune. Dune has a very similar method with the guild navigators, in which the presumption is that they do have faster than light travel, but are only possible by specifically trained navigators, and that training involves breaking loose from our three-dimensional space to think extra planarly, and in an extraordinary manner, and using the spice to do so, to be able to navigate through fifth dimensional space, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, yeah, Fat Ninja. Yeah, that lawn over there with the tentacle sticking out of it, stay off of it. Yeah, don't mind the cracking out the window. Just relax. Now, something else that, although we don't play with it, it can be a little bit disconcerting, is the idea of um, the improbability drive from. Oh, please, someone remind me. Mm, um, why did my mind just blanked on the book of the where they use the uh, uh, Hitchhiker's Guide. Thank you very much. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Thank you, Tesla. Yeah, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy had the improbability drive, which was the idea that you can get to anywhere you want by using some kind of warp drive where all possibilities are possible, and that can it can lead to some hilarious things. But if you still want to remain in the horror element, that having people's bodies turned inside out, and having someone, I don't know, vomit up themselves out of their mouth and seeing a duplicate of themselves, and seeing their body splayed across the walls as like a thin sheet of living flesh, or all, you could really go insane with it if someone decides to open their eyes to the horror that's around them. And what a strange but cool but kooky method to have some sort of environmental encounter, or even creature encounter, where if you open your eyes, there's a good chance you're going to go insane. But if you keep your eyes closed, of course you can't see the enemy in front of you, that the exterior elements won't affect you. Now, another part of something we can steal from modern day into the future, especially when it comes to sailing ships, starships, maybe even submarines, space habitats and such. Not only is it Galaxy Quest, love that movie. Not only can we, thanks, Londell. Not only can we pull from the isolation, but yeah, open your eyes. No, your real eyes. The ones sitting on your forehead, in the back of your forearm, on your forearms, palms of your hand. That's where your real eyes are at. Yeah, thanks, Pillar. Exactly. Yeah, Dead Man brings up Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy had an infinite improbability drive. That's the name of it. And brings up the infinite improbability drive, which I remember reading a short story about a crew that it was almost like they were in a submarine, and the deeper they went, it would become more improbable, and the closer they went to the so-called surface was the actuality and such. And using those, not only do you have isolation inside of a craft of some sort, submarine, sailing ship, space habitat, starship, along with the isolation, you also have the ability to give your players a base of operations. That's kind of one of the cool things about doing like the Age of Piracy type of game, or a road trip kind of game where they're in a Winnebago or 18 wheeler or something. All the players are on a sailing ship, or a maybe a cruise liner, or they're in a spindle habitat, I don't know, orbiting around a binary star or something, or a gas giant, or whatever the case may be. They're going intergalactic. One of the best things is to have a base of operations. You can almost create a third character, and that character is the spaceship itself. The Millennium Falcon is a perfect example of yeah, is a perfect example of a base of operations that the PCs would be invested in. And there are plenty of games that do that, where you have, okay, everyone, you have, an example would be, you have 50 points to spend on your character. You can spend up to 10 of those points for your spacecraft, or hey, let's roll randomly for what our junkyard spacecraft would be. And oftentimes that spacecraft ends up getting its own name. The PCs can have their own rooms inside of it. When it suffers damage or gets repossessed, or the hyperdrive doesn't work, or some kind of alien gremlins gets into the engine system, the navigation computer throws them off. It's always a lot of fun. To do that. Even the role-playing game IC RPG, the Index Card RPG, uses, I was about to say warp drive. Anyway, in it just, Runehammer just basically says, listen, the spaceship is just an excuse to throw your player characters into yet another adventure, and it randomly transports the players across the universe, as kind of a MacGuffin itself, right? It doesn't really need to have stats. It is a tool to push the players into yet another episode where they encounter yet something else. The same thing goes for Star Trek as well. The Star Trek and Starfleet, ship. I mean, can you really trace where they've been? I suppose if you get down and dirty, I suppose you could trace the path of the ship on their, intergalactic investigation and discovery. But really, it's just an excuse for yet one more episode for them to be in orbit around an alien world, to be inside of a nebula, to find some kind of extraordinary astrological event going on, and we can do the same thing, especially if you want to go a little bit more ancient times, piracy and below, maybe Viking ships, and all you have to do is just throw the players in media res, right? You wake up on the beach of an island, you check your charts, and it's an island that's not on any of your charts. You look up into the sky, and it's difficult to see where none of the stars line up for using your sextant and star maps and such. Off in the distance, you see your ship half tilted into the water. It's salvageable, but it suffered some damage from the storm that impacted your crew last night. You all look around and gather your supplies, and someone has the idea of scouting the area and finding out what's living here. What do you do? Very much you can absolutely pull from that and use that use the tropes we have in our modern setting and import it into the past, and so on and so forth. Also, something else that is also used in horror, and maybe even Lovecraftian horror, are having limited tools. So, of course, in modern day, we have, automatic weapons, body armor, um, high levels of telecommunications, and our own vast amounts of scientific knowledge we have at our fingertips, i.e., cell phones, laptops, home computers, and things of that nature. We have vehicles and such. And one of the things in horror is limiting those things, limiting communications, limiting your ability to communicate to the outside world and with each other. And so using tropes from our ancient tabletop role playing, i.e., Dungeons and Dragons, you could throw a modern set of individuals into a place where they're grabbing a lead pipe, they're grabbing a giant wrench as a weapon. They're trying to assemble weapons like, I'm going to make myself a flamethrower using the spray can and a lighter. I'm going to take the fire extinguisher and use it to make a big fog cloud and blind the creature. Of course, someone's maybe has a knife or using a kitchen utensil and such. Bofferin says maybe you have a Jules Verne or H.G. Wells style retro sci-fi. Again, the Jules Verne Victorian era retro sci-fi also works really well, and I think it really works. It seems to be a kind of a theme in Dungeons and Dragons as well. Lots of clockwork and steam powered styled machines are in Dungeons and Dragons, even though we like to call it medieval. It's not really. Warforged and clockwork machines and dwarves with steam powered, I don't know, robots or rolling equipment and such, definitely fits into a Jules Verne style of game, especially when, your alien planets are all inhabited. We're going to Mars because there's canals on Mars. Of course, there are tribal people that live on Mars using ships powered by the sunlight or something of that nature, i.e. from John Carter of Mars, Now, this is what I'm about to say is something that might need to be brought up in a session 0, or at least with players that are willing to embrace the idea of Lovecraftian horror. And yeah, Jonathan Crine says D&D has a Renaissance aesthetic in terms of its tech level. Yeah, very much Renaissance. There's a modern aesthetic to it as well. Literacy, printing, some limited firearms. There's some modern sensibilities to it. So sure, it's kind of a hodgepodge, and in that way, it draws as many people as possible, fans of it as well. Rickard says, if you're going more fantasy, in space, portal circles and teleportation spells could be a good way to go. Absolutely. And I think I believe the more science fiction we go, we tend to want to explain things away with science, and Lovecraftian horror specifically is a type of genre in which the more you know, the more you really wish you didn't know. And so in a way, your players this should be an agreement with your players that there are some things that man was not meant to know, meaning that science is not going to explain why there's some weird tentacle beast reaching out of a black hole. Science won't be able to explain why it is that the perfectly spherical artifact that you found floating in the derelict spaceship that you brought onto your own ship, when you sleep, it brings forth your subconscious fears and brings them into physical form temporarily when people are sleeping at night or something. Like the confronting the horrors might have a scientific basis, right? It follows the laws of physics, but its creation, the reason it exists, might be something that's far away from our understanding. Uh, Even going so far as to say, like the Alien franchise, Alien, Aliens, et cetera, et cetera. Although the xenomorphs are physical creatures, they don't come from an extra dimensional surface, planar surface or something, but how they operate is completely alien to our way of thinking. They breed, they learn, they adapt. Um, their method of breeding is off-putting. Having a squid, starfish-like thing, wrap around your face and stick its alien moist genitalia down your throat to deposit an egg for it to burst out of your stomach is not something that we normally see in our creatures on our own planet, but it does have a purpose. It does have there really is a, like, okay, I get what it's doing. I don't want it in my mouth. I don't want to get stomach pains when I'm sitting down at dinner. I don't want to be trapped inside of some extruded crap sitting against the warm fusion powered base, like in the movie Aliens, where people were like, kill me, please, kill me, before getting chest bursted, right? So, but there's also, this is a strange thing to say, because I've brought this up before. We did it in Subterranean. We kind of talked about it on Monday, that when you're creating your horrors, in a strange way, adding limitations to them makes them even more horrible. We brought up the idea of blind creatures that can hear you, the idea of, if you see the creature, it will drive you mad, because the only like Bird Box, right? No one ever sees the creature. And in the movie Bird Box on Netflix here in the States, there was someone who compiled a number of like charcoal images of what people think the creature looks like, but none of them were the same. And I mean, imagine this. Imagine like a doppelganger. You could have I'll get to you, Rickard, just a moment. A doppelganger, we know that they can take on the shape of other humanoids, but it's so much more horrible if that doppelganger is like bent over the body of someone and you think they're kissing them, but when you turn the corner and look at it from a different angle, they're like sticking their proboscis down into the throat of someone who's choking to death, and getting their internal liquid sucked out. And then the doppelganger is then able to take the skin and get inside of the skin and put it on like a suit, and maybe the doppelganger has a number of these suits similar to the faces from the Faceless Men, or the doppelganger is somehow, when the doppelganger leaves any of its bodies, it like claws its way out of the mouth and like rips its way out to then have to attack someone else and shove its way down into the mouth of someone else. I guess it's something like a intellect devourer, that brain creature with the 4 limbs or whatnot. But again, a doppelganger doing like an invasion of the body snatchers, where they're capturing people and knocking them out and putting them inside of stasis chamber pods. No, a doppelganger in the classic sense of Dungeons and Dragons doesn't operate that way, but seeing it operate that way would be kind of cool, and would give an opportunity for the players to maybe save some people out of these chambers, or maybe there's some kind of psychic link between their victims and the forms they take, where the doppelganger is able to use their memories to enhance their ability to pretend to be other people. And of course, they are agents of the mind flayers, who are agents, the Illithids, who are agents of the elder brain, so on and so forth. Rickard says, Lovecraftian horror world building prompt: take 10 astrological events in our solar system, such as moon cycle, solar flares, Saturn's rings, meteors, and come up with the real reason for it, such as the elder gods. Yeah, as a matter of fact, the planets in our system were named after the gods, Mars, Jupiter, Mercury. You could take hints of that, or even look up. I suppose you could discover not the scientific basis of the astrological events, but the the wives' tale events, and craft something about the elder gods around it. For example, instead of Mars being a red planet, Mars represents the god of war, and maybe that particular elder god, when Mars has ascended, because in astrology there's like planets can be ascended or descended or in retrograde and such, and maybe the astrological stars and events we see in the sky, like Rickard says, meteors and comets and solar flares, having a psychological effect on the population below them, and maybe brought into the modern day or even far future. It's like, we don't know why these things are happening to us today, but they are, and we better watch out. Plura says, my shapeshifter had to eat people's faces, which meant that the bodies were pretty horrible to look at. Yeah, exactly. I mean, seeing dead bodies with their faces consumed or caved in some kind of way, or destroyed by like some weird acid, or I'm going to bring up something really old in comic books. Rom, the Space Knight, fighting the Dire Wraiths. Rom was a toy, by the way. The Dire Wraiths were these aliens that had a tongue with like a drill, and the tongue would lash out and pop people right through the center of their skull. And the Dire Wraiths would just like suck in their bodies, and like I don't know, like a juice box or something. And then they would be able to take these people's places, and they would leave these like desiccated skins left behind and whatnot. Jonathan Crine says, in a thought about anatomy, when describing an aberration, go for the inefficient method. Real animals like wasps implant eggs like a xenomorph, but it just pokes a hole. Inefficient is unnatural, and unnatural is scary. Hell yeah. Things that come about by poking us, implanting things, evidence of being infected by having if you scroll up in the Discord, I put a video in there. It's only a minute and a half, where a doctor pulls a worm out of the eyeball of a patient. When the players start looking around at each other and they see worms, blackened worms crawling under their skin, it's going to make them like go crazy. Rock grubs were one of the worst things you could ever confront in Dungeons and Dragons, and it still is. We're gonna have to cut your arm off. No, but they're climbing towards your heart in 6 rounds. Please don't. Dead Man and Storyteller brings up the hollow creature from Eclipse Phase. There's a skin suit and a nanoplasma. I don't remember the hollow creature from Eclipse Phase. I don't know why I don't remember that. Well, there's a lot of background stuff for Eclipse Phase, but Eclipse Phase, the role-playing game, absolutely, transhuman horror, absolutely embraces Lovecraftian horror, where there's a computer virus, kind of left over by the Titans and kind of imported from like the exurgent virus. It's murky on purpose, but anyway, there's a computer virus, and if you take a look at the computer virus, there's something known as a basilisk hack, and it basically, looking at the virus on your computer screen, will hack into your brain and put a subconscious message into your brain, i.e. hypnotism, driving people insane, which is another thing as well. When being in a confined space, sailing ship, underground haven, a castle, locked away because of massive storms, an underground barracks, a starship, some place that's isolated from humanity, and knowing that there's something terrible on the outside and there's no place to run, having one or more people inside that are air quotes infected by something, whether it's a real infection, whether they're spreading their, vomitous maggots into somebody else's throat, whether it's an intellectual infection where they look into someone's eyes and it passes from one person to another, or if they grab someone, much like the movie Fallen, where something is invading people and all you need to do is just brush against someone else, and the somewhat ethereal demonic thing can spread from one person to another. Is pretty horrible. And of course, paranoia has to spread around. And what a great way to add in a whole, if you're someone who loves to have NPCs and that's your bomb, not a lot of people, including me, are very good about NPCs, but if you're somebody who likes to pop out a ton of NPCs at a time, that's a great way to show the horror. Have a bunch of people just get killed randomly. Bodies strung up in the rafters, people's bodies split open, the paranoia that they have pointing the fingers at the PCs as being the enemy when everyone knows full well that they are the enemy themselves or something. A bunch of people pointing fingers at each other while the real big bad is sitting in the back, laughing at the chaos it's creating. Barfrin says altered carbon, bodies being not real, basically your biological body not really being your own is a thing. Altered carbon and transhumanism, eclipse phase. I think just some other, there are, and of course, GURPS transhuman is taking the idea that technology has gotten to the point where, we can just download our brains into a cortical stack, and that cortical stack can be placed into any body, any literal body. And hilarity ensues when you wake up inside of a body that is not really the one you intended to wake up in, and it could be pretty horrible. Especially, what is it? Body dysmorphia is a condition where someone believes that their brain is not in the body they were supposed to be in, and there's a rebellion against the body and the mind. Pillar-ist says, I think that's one particularly horrible thing, having to cause yourself harm to save your life, cutting off your own arm, gouging out your own eye, etc. Can we say the Saw movies? I mean, that's why they were so popular in the first place. Like, what harm would you do to yourself? How much is your life worth that you would claw out your own eye to get to something implanted behind it? Would you really use your own bare hands to rip open the flesh of a loved one to get at a key that, will unlock the thing that's going to rip your face open, right? Would you jump into a pit full of hypodermic needles to search for the one thing that will save your life? And even thinking about it right now, it's like, oh, look, I know game-wise, some of those things, because games tend to not be extremely, they're not real, right? It's hit point damage. It's something I can heal next round or take a long rest and I'm fine. But it's the idea of doing it that's the real horror. And if you have players that are willing to embrace that and just say to your face, like, listen, I don't care how much damage my character may or may not take, I'm not doing that, and of course, part of this is the idea of how much of verisimilitude is there. Yes, I know Dungeons and Dragons has a dagger and it does die for damage, and maybe your character has 38 hit points. But when you're told you have to take this dagger and, slice open your own wrist to get the worm out, the two, sometimes the two don't mix. And so rules as written may not embody what you're looking for. So that might even be choosing a different game system or using the game system and saying, hey guys, listen, let's just immerse ourselves into this and understand that, none of us wants to try to, take a knife and carve out our own eyelid to get the bug out. Dead Man, the storyteller says the flesh party from eclipse phase. A bunch of people are partially disassembled and spread over an area. Oh, that's right. That's right. And they even oh man. I believe there's even, and this might not be eclipse phase. There are even people who engage in to just feel something. They engage in like torture parties where they flay their own flesh off, or implant psychological horrors into their brain just to feel like paranoia or schizophrenia or manic depression and such. I'm not sure if that's the eclipse phase, but I remember reading something like that in that style of gaming. Again, when you have players, let's say, let's go for Shadowrun, let's go for Cyberpunk, transhuman space, where players have implants and there's hacking and technology, BioWare and nanotechnology, that for the players to not trust what's inside of their own body, or not trust that they will be implanted in the body they wish. The character who's a full cyborg, and come to find out that some kind of computer virus has infected their own body, is in and of itself its own horror. Or when the players perform their extraordinary actions, they are energizing or calling or giving of themselves to something else that's horrible. So the idea of the psychic that is able to use their psychic powers, but by doing it, they become a beacon for some other psychic entities to come after them and try to go inside of them. Or maybe the PCs are completely unaffected, but everyone around them they see being infected by something else, whether it's a psychic entity taking over their minds, a computer virus taking over their cybernetic systems, or some creature from the deep unknown is slowly and surely drawing more and more converts to its way of elder gods and way of thinking. Rickard says meteors could be alien horrors traveling, an alien horror traveling egg. Ooh. See color out of space. Sure of that. Solar flare, the elder gods sleeping in the center of the sun, stirring in their sleep. And very much an astrological event could have both it could both herald some sort of doom and also have a physical effect. So the meteor shower could literally be things falling out of the sky and spreading across the planetary landscape or something. And mind you, you could do this in whether it's your Dungeons and Dragons or far future. If the PCs land on some unexplored landscape, whether they're traveling through the plains, they're doing Starjammer and they go to an alien planet, it doesn't matter. They land on some alien landscape. You can switch the rules around as much as you want. Does gravity work the same? How about air? Does the landscape change? Are there things falling out of the sky? Are there things, do eclipses happen every 27 hours? Are there solar flares where the sky burns? Does the planet spin? Does it have an extremely hot and cold rotational tilt? And every 3 hours the planet burns to a cinder and then is frozen in ice or something, and any number of things. Are there geysers of poison gas and tentacle creatures reaching out of the ground when the three suns set on the horizon and literally the planet's on the edge of the galaxy, so there's literally not even a star in the sky or something? Rift's wormwood, the planet is a living being, so the ground is flesh. Yeah, we gotta we have to bring back the adventuring on the adventures in flesh. We've brought that up before, and you could of definitely bring biological systems writ large, right? We brought up internal organs and sphincters, all that kind of business. Didn't talk about bone. Bone could be foundations, structures holding something up, with bone marrow maybe being like biological factories spewing out some sort of creatures. Um, didn't really talk so much about neurological systems, but they could be electrical arcs, creatures, with electrical, um, I don't know, electrical charges or something in their bodies, and they link together. They could also have a psychological effect as well. A creature with these electrical abilities can hypnotize you or make your body act, but your brain is still functioning, but your body's acting in a manner that you don't want, as these bugs attach to the player character's arm, and it makes the player character's arm try to swing at some other members of the party. And he's like, please get this thing off of me. Rickard goes on to say Saturn's rings. The rings are actually elder creatures swarming around their sleeping god, Saturn. The moon cycle. The moon is actually an eye, and when the conditions are right, the eye can open. Ooh, that's a great way to. That brings up a great way to shift the spotlight around, shift the conditions around. Me, I always talk about the third pillar of gaming, exploration, changing. If you change the environment, it also changes the dynamic of the player characters. But imagine, if you will, let's go to the moon. Let's go to the elder god Sauron, right? The big eye that opens up and you cannot hide from it. That could be a thing where the players can time it, and they understand once the eye opens up and we do any of our extraordinary functions, there's no stealth involved. We are going to be found. And so maybe it's limited when the person with the psychic powers, the person with the magic, the sorcerer, the warlock, the cleric tries to use their powers, and they understand, hey guys, you guys are going to have to leave away from me, because the minute I open myself up, I don't know, the patrolling creatures are going to know who I am. The blind displacer beasts that can only sniff out the magic that's being used by rebel forces, such as the player characters. It's like, once I do this, we're going to draw holy hell down on us. So let's be prepared. Do we really want to use this magic? And the player's like, yeah, we really need to use it now. It's like, okay. And, the cleric maybe tries to heal the party. And all of a sudden, many kilometers or miles away, these creatures look up and they're like, they start scrambling across the countryside, towards the players, to try to kill them and triangulate their locations. So I definitely would love to see something like that. And you could do various combinations. So maybe the players have to hide out before the moon starts to wax or wane, almost like the phases of the moon could be the eye opening and closing, a kind of squinting, and then the eye opens completely up, and then the eyelid starts to shut. And then there are these other astrological events that enhance or hinder what the party is doing. So one astrological event could be like an eclipse, could be something where the players want to use some stealth. This is the great time to do it, because this really helps out when there isn't any daylight, at all for the next 38 hours or what have you. Rickard says, figured I'd write some examples on my world building process. Well, yeah, hell yeah. Definitely stealable, but I'm sure you had that in your back pocket anyway. Plura says, I hate it when you're escaping from the Empire and the land and the land inside a giant worm. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to have a living community inside of a giant worm, but it sure is cool, right? The reality of it, nah. But what you do is, instead of going, well, that doesn't make sense, what you instead use the other side of the equation. Go, you know what? I'm going to make this exist, and here's the reason why it exists. And of course, we're talking Lovecraftian horror. We don't need a reason for it to exist at all. I mean, there's nothing stopping us from saying that the Lovecraftian horror are sending tens of thousands of mind flayers into our upper atmosphere using living, 1,000-mile long living serpents that are worms that have cities, literal cities inside of their biological organs, hatching and giving birth to more and more mind flayer and mind flayer like creatures, the elithids and all the other pseudo-intelligent cephalopods inside of it, depositing them, disgorging them in a pools of fluid down onto the planetary surface as the slowly coiling worms or snakes or something maneuver in and out of the clouds in the dark skies above the ground with, I don't know, heat lightning charging their bodies or something. And the PCs are just like looking up like, holy shit, I'm not doing that. I'm first level, you know? Jonathan Grimes says, on dysmorphia, maybe alien minds experience serious psychological harm when possessing a human body. Our minds are alien to them, mind flayers or body snatchers going mad on human thought, which might be a perfect explanation for why creatures like doppelgangers, rakshasa, mind flayers, etc., have not, quote unquote, taken over. Right? We love to rationalize. Well, if dragons existed, they would take over the world. And then someone else is like, well, if mind flayers existed, they would take over the world. You know, et cetera, et cetera. But maybe the reason is doppelgangers and those kind of creatures can't remain in our human society because maybe they are driven mad. Maybe it's a temporary thing. It's like we had a little preamble. It's the headache that just won't go away unless someone picks you up and shakes it loose out of your body, right? It's the mind flayer that sure, it can eat your brains and uncover secret knowledge inside of you. It is I believe like sphinxes can do this. I believe Rakshasa as well. Plenty of fiends can literally look at you and uncover all of your deep, dark secrets. But maybe those deep, dark secrets are an infection into them that gets them. It's almost something that disrupts their nature. And that in itself could be a secret that humanity hasn't found out. I don't know what you would do with it, but you know, the doppelganger maybe cannot associate in modern society for more than a few months at a time before they have to kill that person or they've had to kill that person to take them over. And then all of a sudden they disappear and they leave evidence behind, their empty skin behind that a doppelganger really was them. And the PCs are like, whoa, how long was that? You know, how long was the old lady that gave us those tasty pastries? How long was she a doppelganger? Was she a doppelganger the whole time? Is she still alive? You know, so on and so forth. And maybe, just maybe, the PCs, you're running a game where the PCs must inhabit the bodies of others, maybe some of the aliens or other people in the game, and they suffer some form of body dysmorphia so that they're not able to maintain their forms forever, which also could be why, you know, that could be a reason why druids can't maintain their wild shape forever. It's, you know, if you become a bear, too long, you're going to become a bear forever. And maybe some of the ancient druids, the quote unquote high level druids, really want to become their wild shape and they never turn back. And maybe that's where some of the dire creatures come from, or a druid becomes a treant or something permanently. Anyway, Rickard says it was a smuggler cave. Lots of smugglers had hidden in that cave, and you know smugglers can't keep track of their own worm pets. Stranded there and started eating the other spaceships to survive, you know. Hashtag headcanon. Yeah. The landing the Millennium Falcon inside of the worm. It's like, yeah, like, wow, this is a great place to hide. We need to let other people know this is a great place to hide. Leaving a little beacon. The worm's like, yep. Yep. Go on inside. And of course, of course, the creeping doom is always another Lovecraftian thing. Creeping horrors from the edge of space, creeping horrors coming from other dimensional regions, the classic Call of Cthulhu, evil cult summoning an elder species from another world by opening up a portal and having the epilogue where one or more of the cultists that were defeated may be arrested or gotten away, and of course something dark floats in the back of their eyes as a little worm skitters across their eyeball or something, and there's one little thing that just didn't escape, from being burned to a crisp, while the Call of Cthulhu players are like, I can't believe we survived with our minds and brains intact. Pillar-ist says, maybe the mind flayers see things faster than humans, like flies, which prevents them from effectively using technology, as it's just like a strobe to them. True. And for some reason, we associate mind flayers with a little bit of like biotechnology as well. It's possible, again, doing the reskinning thing, that game wise, they have in Dungeons and Dragons, they have spell-like effects, and those spell-like effects are really their psychic powers. We're just reskinning them, right? So some of their technology or biotechnology could literally be reskinned creatures that are able to send messages. They could be reskinned spells that are like biological functions. So instead of a charm person or hold monster spell, it's literally them placing a slug-like thing on your neck that controls that person. Yeah. Right. Dead Man the Storyteller says an insect crawls out of their mouth and then goes into the nose. Hell yeah. That's listen, there's one thing is to go, I'm going to use the monster uses charm person on you, make a save, right? Okay. We know what that is. That's being very bland. There's something else by saying the creature reaches out its tentacled four fingers, a small opening opens up in the palm of its hand, and extruding out this insect. It's drawing its body, through a slug-like moisture as it reaches towards you, and there's such horror in your eyes you can't move because you roll the dice. Oh, you failed your save. Yeah, it climbs off of, it drips off of the tentacles and lands on your shoulder, and it slides slowly across your neck. The insect comes towards you. It's antennae and claws, long and thin, and it reaches inside of your ear and stretches across your eye. You have no control over your body. When you start to describe things like that, when you start to describe the mind flayer vomiting up some kind of insect or whatever, and it's coming regurgitating out of its body, and you see it like almost sliding up its skin or whatever. Okay, that turns something simple like hold monster, charm person, a hypnosis spell, any kind of thing like that, and makes it completely horrible. Listen, none of us want regurgitant on us at all for any reason, whether it's good or bad. No, thanks, Kitty. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, none of us want regurgitant on us, let alone mixing it with, I don't know, flayed flesh and cephalopod excrement combined with, valves and sphincters. When you start combining all of those things in a whole hell of a lot of body horror, it's pretty nasty. And yeah, the Goa'uld from Stargate. Yep, absolutely. And again, we're talking far future and modern day. You could literally run this as a one shot, or do world building in which the players are the heroes, but they're only the heroes because for a short amount of time, they are using aspects of this evil they're fighting evil with evil, and evil is a relative term. This is an alien infection, an alien incursion. So, for example, mentioned this before, warlocks in the world might just be their connection to the hive mind. Barbarians might be the ability for the human beings to snap their brains into madness or something. So, and maybe this could be a one shot where listen, at the end of this, all of you are going to either be dead or go insane, period. Let's just figure out which one happens first, right? Um, so yes, absolutely. What else is part of Lovecraftian horror? Oh, well, of course we have the body horror aspect of that, and the idea of the player characters, the human beings or the humanoids in your world having to harm themselves or carry something inside of them to maybe succeed. Maybe there's some form of insertion the players must take with them, and the overlords understand, well, they understand what weapons are, but that person with the stomach ache, we don't care about them, we might eat them as food. But literally the players may need to have to vomit up whatever it is, or to go even darker, in order to win, the players must compromise their morals, and maybe there are individuals who are willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. And so they infect themselves with a disease or some kind of parasite, and the PCs must sneak the NPCs into certain locations to be consumed by the elder brain or injected into the lungs or heart of the alien hive to infect it, and those individuals are sacrificing themselves. Again, you can add a time limit, i.e., they're going to chest burst if you don't get them in there within 3 hours. And little by little, maybe they're starting to show symptoms of it: stomach pains, blood in their eyes, of course, vomiting. Maybe their bones start to break. The black. The gray ooze, black pudding, gelatinous ochre jelly, whatever crap, yellow fungus inside of them starts to come out, and the PCs are using these as guerrilla war tactics. That could also be an issue as well, so that might be kind of cool. Pelor says the sense of a being who doesn't really care about you. You just don't even register as a thing, like an ant. It might kill you, it might not, but it won't care either way. And using that, exploring, let's take that idea and stretch it bigger. A lot of times in gaming, especially 5th edition, you hear people talking about balance, right? Game balance. I need to balance an encounter. How do I balance this thing? What are the numbers? How do I calculate my balance? Well, there's only 4 player characters, and I was expecting 6. Is there correct balance? Your best tool for balance, in my opinion, is role playing. Role play your creatures. Just because it's a mind flayer, like Pelor says, this sense of being insignificant. Does a pit fiend or Baylor care about regular old human beings? Maybe not. Maybe that's the horror that is more horrible than being attacked by it. It just ignores you. And who's to say that any number of creatures, there's a hive of ankhegs or giant spiders or giant centipedes or some other kind of insectoid creature. What do? Players are like, well, are they attacking us? DM says, well, no, they're streaming out of their hive, and they're streaming across the village, and they're stealing people's stuff because they're collecting things for their hive, and they're going back. They're not fighting you at all. They're ignoring you. They have no reason to fight you. And the PC's like, well, do we move through them? I don't know. A hive of ants is very intelligent. One ant is pretty mindless. It's pretty dumb. So PC's fighting a mindless ant, that ant might be completely confused as to what to do to defend itself. A hive of ants is like, these things are coming after us, greatly. We're going to swarm over those PCs, right? So role-playing creatures, even mindless creatures, like zombies and skeletons and constructs, have a purpose. The iron golem that's protecting the dungeon may grab the PCs, throw them out of the door, and slam the door shut, i.e., it stops fighting because it's already accomplished its mission. That kind of thing. So, hey, baby, love you. The herald The Heraldrix has spoken. It has been an hour. I lost track of time. Um, the the beings from afar, the elder gods brought to us by the astrological events as you are trapped on your starship, um, have come to an end, or is it an end just in your mind? We really didn't even talk about so much about insanity and the idea that like movies like Flatliners and other intellectual properties where if you look into darkness, darkness will look, if you look into the abyss looks right back at you. Yeah, she who hath heralded the end has spoken. Exactly. So, but we didn't even talk about the madness part, and that is yet another element. We know Call of Cthulhu completely embraces the idea that if you fail your sanity check, you're going to go insane. Let's pull those rules out. Let's open up the DMG or maybe the player's handbook. I can't remember where it's at, and use the short-term and long-term insanity. Or if you really want to, use one of the cinematic environments books. I helped write these things. That's a little my brainchild there. Come on, guys, help me out here. Use the despair mechanic before going into short-term insanity and then long-term. Had to do a little plug there. So, and not only should we embrace it just because it's kind of part of Lovecraftian horror, it's also a way to say, hey, I know the barbarian and the paladin are way up front, and they're the physical, they're the damage dealers up front. But we also have some hazards here in the background where you're going to have to be intelligent and wise and charismatic to weave your way through it. Although the paladin might be able to do that as well. Anyway, you get my point. Testing people in their strong and weak parts, letting your players shine. Some of them will shine, others will fail, and moving that spotlight around is really great. Hey, Kitty, thank you very much. It's definitely been an hour. James Lundell says, oh, you reminded me of Tales from the Crypt with the Crypt Keeper. Yeah, that old Crypt Keeper, yeah. Yeah, I remember that show. Oh, great. Guys, everyone, listen, thank you very much for joining me. This week, we talked about aberrants. I had thought about each week breaking down each creature type and going through the whole week, but let's do every other week. So next week, we're going to do curses. Guys brought it up, so that's your fault. We're going to do curses all week. Curses foiled again. If it wasn't for you meddling kids, I'd have gotten away with it. We're going to do curses, drats. No, not those kind of curses. Probably the evil eye, witches, curses that have been cast on a family bloodline, creatures created by curses, classic creatures that we've changed over time from, vampire blood curses, lycanthropy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to talk about curses, using them in a game, maybe everything from ancient curses from millennia ago all the way to player characters creating and doing their own curses. Some of it successful, some of it not game-wise. PCs draw the idea of going into crypts that are protected by a curse, the ancient mummy, all of those things. Yeah. The curse word could work well for World Building Wednesday. Yeah, well, you joke, but there's a reason for curse words, right? You don't say certain things to certain people, or otherwise you curse them. When someone sneezes, you say, "I bless you," right? Where'd that come from? Well, it comes from people being sick and dying and stuff. But in a arcane sense, there might be languages or even certain languages that are considered curses just for speaking them. You spoke Draconic, pow, slap across the face. How dare you, talk to me that way? Keep my name out your mouth. Right? Anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me. Until next week, thank you. Oh, and anyone who stuck this long through any of this stuff or takes a look at these videos, please go down below into the foundation. You're going to find little nooks and crannies, and that's going to give you some information as to who the hell I am, what the hell I do, and in the larger world, the people that I associate that make what I do possible in this channel. Lots of brilliant people, far smarter than I am, take part in these live streams. So thank you very much, guys. Have a great day.